U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 3-day pause on new 50% tariffs on Canadian goods, saying Washington and Ottawa have reached an agreement in principle. Trump said the pause was based on the fact that the two countries had a deal subject to finalizing the necessary documents. But Canada has not immediately confirmed Trump's announcement. And that leaves one crucial question hanging over North American trade. Have the U.S. and Canada actually struck a deal, or has Washington simply bought both sides 3 more days to prevent another trade war? The latest development came after Trump spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on Tuesday. It was their second conversation this week, and the talks come after weeks of intense negotiations between Washington and Ottawa. The immediate pressure point is a new round of U.S. tariffs. The proposed 50% tariffs would apply to around $20 billion worth of Canadian imports. And unlike some earlier tariff measures, these new duties could hit Canadian goods even if they qualify for preferential treatment under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, or USMCA. That makes this particularly significant, because USMCA was designed to provide a framework for largely tariff-free trade between the 3 North American economies, and Canada is deeply integrated into the U.S. economy. Goods cross the border multiple times during the manufacturing process. That is particularly true for the automobile industry. So even a tariff aimed at Canadian products can ultimately affect American manufacturers, workers, and consumers. And that is why the auto sector has become one of the biggest sticking points in the negotiations. Washington currently imposes a 25% tariff on Canadian vehicles. The two sides have reportedly discussed reducing that rate to 15%, but there is another condition. The final tariff burden could depend on how much of a vehicle's content is produced inside the United States, and this is where the negotiations become complicated. Washington wants only U.S.-produced content to count when calculating tariff deductions. Canada, meanwhile, wants all North American content to count, including parts manufactured in Canada and Mexico. That disagreement may sound technical, but it could have billions of dollars of consequences for automakers operating across the continent, and the consequences would not stop at automobiles. Canadian industries including lumber, wine, and dairy could also be exposed to significant pressure. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce has warned that billions of dollars worth of goods could now be at risk. Business groups say companies have already been holding back on hiring, investment, and expansion because of uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy. And another round of tariffs could make that uncertainty even worse. For Canada, the concern is not simply about losing access to the U.S. market. It is about the potential disruption of an economic relationship worth hundreds of billions of dollars every year. The United States is Canada's overwhelmingly dominant trading partner, and thousands of businesses on both sides of the border depend on that relationship. That means a full-scale trade war would not necessarily produce a clear winner. U.S. officials have repeatedly criticized Canada's dairy supply management system. Washington has also objected to restrictions affecting American liquor products in some Canadian provinces. And these issues have become part of the broader American argument that Canada needs to make its market more accessible to U.S. businesses. For Ottawa, however, the stakes are much broader. Canada has to negotiate with its largest economic partner while also protecting its domestic industries. And Prime Minister Mark Carney's government has been trying to find that balance. Canadian trade officials have been in Washington for days. Canada's minister responsible for U.S. trade, Dominic LeBlanc, and chief trade negotiator Janice Charette have been directly involved in the discussions. They have met senior U.S. officials, including U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. But while the negotiations continue, Trump has introduced another potentially important issue: the Keystone XL pipeline. Trump said the controversial pipeline project could potentially be awoken from the grave. The project was canceled by former President Joe Biden in 2021 after years of environmental and indigenous opposition. Keystone XL was designed to transport Canadian crude oil into the United States. Its possible revival would therefore have implications far beyond the current tariff dispute. It could strengthen energy ties between the two countries while giving Canada another major route into the American energy market. But Trump's comment did not include details about how the pipeline could actually be revived, so for now it remains more of a political signal than a completed policy agreement. And that distinction is important. Because despite Trump's announcement, the details of the supposed US-Canada deal remain unclear. That means these next 3 days could be critical. The tariff pause gives negotiators additional time to settle the remaining details, but it also creates a very tight deadline, and the next 3 days could determine whether North America's biggest trading relationship gets a new deal or another tariff war.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to Mirror Now.